Managing child's anxiety during lockdown has been a serious concern for politicians, for teachers, and particularly for parents. But what are some of the complications of anxiety coming out of lockdown, and how might children be affected by anxiety after coronavirus? Well, on today's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to be taking a look at how to manage children's anxiety after lockdown. What's up guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched, where we look at all things mental health and psychology. If you're enjoying GetPsyched, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and you can hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get weekly reminders every time I upload. If you're enjoying today's video as well, make sure to hit the like button and you can comment and I'll be sure to get back to you. So like I say, today we're taking a look at managing children's anxiety after lockdown, and I think this is a really appropriate time for this video as lockdown measures due to coronavirus are starting to alleviate in many parts of the world, and here in the United Kingdom we're starting to see some easing of lockdown restrictions, and that is including some thoughts about getting back to school. I know some parts of England, schools are trying to get back into operation. I know here in Scotland we're thinking about going full-time education or back into school full-time after the summer. There's a lot of anxiety around what that means, and particularly for children. And I actually was struck when I was taking a walk in the park with my wife the other day, and it got me thinking about making this video. We were walking down the park and it was pretty busy. You know, lockdown legislation has lifted to some degree that allows people to be outside more. And in all honesty, there probably wasn't a massive amount of social distancing going on with people. We were trying our best, but we passed by a child who got really upset with their mum because there were so many people in the park. And I was saying to my wife, like, this is, you know, it's appropriate measures that we have in place, but we have to think about the anxiety ramifications over these lockdown legislations and over the fact of coronavirus. And adults feel that level of anxiety, but children particularly feel that level of anxiety because they're not that mature yet, because they don't fully understand the situation. That anxiety can really spike, and we're actually seeing that in some statistics. The other day, Childline released a report that stated that from the period of January to March, they had over about 7,000 calls from children. Currently, each week, they are receiving 2,000 calls. So between March to now, they've been receiving 2,000 calls a week. Within a 3-month spell from January to March, they received a total of 7,000. And that just shows you the level of which children are experiencing challenges. Of course, children access Childline for many different reasons as well, but many of them access Childline for mental health difficulties. It shows you just how much lockdown and coronavirus is having an impact on children's mental health. There's been other reports as well that have showed a 700% increase in depressive symptoms and anxious symptoms amongst children under the age of 12. We really need to start thinking about how mental health is being impacted on children due to lockdown and coronavirus, particularly as lockdown eases. Now, I've actually added a couple of links down in the description. I've added the link that Childline gives for parents and for children as well. So the phone number is there, the website is there. I've also added another link for parents, the NSPCC website, which is just giving a little bit of advice for children's anxiety during lockdown, during coronavirus. And they actually talk a lot about managing children's anxiety after lockdown, or managing children's anxiety after coronavirus. And I think there's some really important points in those links that I'm not going to have a massive amount of time to go through in this video. So by all means, check out those links and you'll hopefully get some advice. Just a key point here as well, I've done a lot of videos on coronavirus recently, and I looked at, you know, lessons we can learn from coronavirus, mental health lessons we can learn from coronavirus. I had a big video that went really quite popular with a number of therapists and psychologists that I know that gave their key points on managing coronavirus. You maybe want to check all those videos out. I'm going to put them in the description. I'm going to pop some of them above my head throughout the video as well. So check out our more recent videos on coronavirus too. So I'm going to give a couple of top tips on how to best manage children's anxiety as lockdown eases, or how to best manage kids' anxiety after coronavirus. I'm going to give a few top tips that I think are really important for all adults to consider when trying to ease that anxiety. My first one is to talk to them. I always think on GetPsyched, I'm a little bit biased because as a counselling psychologist in training, I talk a lot about talking to people and I talk a lot about therapy, but you know, I think that interpersonal communication is so important, particularly in times like this. And I think between you and your child, having an open form of dialogue, having an open form of communication is so important. Anxiety often can make us feel very isolated. It can actually make us feel very confused. And you put all of those things into the body and mind and brain of a child, it's going to perpetuate, it's going to be even bigger. That isolation and confusion is going to be even grander than it is in adults. So we need to talk to children. We need to have that level of communication. We need to let them know that things are okay. that process of talking to children as well makes things clearer. We're in a world of supreme confusion. You know, I know I said earlier about lockdown measures getting lifted. That's not as straightforward as what I'm saying there. It's a massive amount of confusion, and adults are confused as well. That's okay, that's absolutely fine. But we need to talk to our children about anxiety. We need to talk to our children about coronavirus, about lockdown, about those measures lifting, in order to bring them a little bit of clarity. The more clarity that we have, the less anxiety ultimately we hope to have. Anxiety is so founded in the intolerance of uncertainty. You know, how much can we tolerate uncertainty in our world? And you think right now about how much uncertainty there is. We need to help children to tolerate that better, and we do that by talking to them. I'm really interested to hear your points as well, guys. If you've got any comments or if you've got your own tips, by all means, please comment on the video. I'll get back to you. Let me know what you think. My next point is to illustrate a timeline of events. And I do this because I think this kind of exercise, actually I do this with clients sometimes, it brings more clarity to the lineage of a situation or historical factors. And often I do this with clients to kind of address some key points in a lineage or historically or some kind of key events for people. And actually, I think this exercise, I was thinking as I was putting this video script together, I actually think this exercise could be really good in bringing clarity to a confusing situation for a child. You know, when we're trying to think about managing child's anxiety after lockdown, looking back retrospectively at the situation as a whole, creating a timeline, making that colourful, getting the child involved to draw that out and thinking, you know, what has actually happened over the past 4 months? This has been chaotic for children. Overnight, they pretty much stopped seeing their friends. Overnight, they stopped seeing their grandparents. Overnight, they stopped going to school. There's been such a mad couple of months, particularly for children. Let's draw a timeline out. Let's try and bring clarity to it. Let's try and bring an understanding to it as best we can. Get the child involved in making that, make it colourful, make it fun, and then talk about it and talk about each of those steps. You know, this is when lockdown started. You know, this is what happened. You know, this is when school stopped. Now we're looking at the future. School might be opening again. How do you feel about that? I think a timeline can be really effective there. Okay, my next key point on managing kids' anxiety after coronavirus is to reassure them as best as possible. I think this is appropriate for everybody. As lockdown measures are starting to lift, they're starting to lift for a reason, and that's because what we have been doing has been working, so to speak, although the UK has a lot to answer for. But I think obviously there's a dip in cases, infection rates and death rates. So we need to reassure our young people and say, actually, this is a good thing. You know, things are getting better. Things are improving from what was maybe a scary time once before. Things are really on the mend. So that level of reassurance is vital. Kids are seeking that out. You know, that child in that park that I passed with my wife the other day was scared. He needed reassurance that actually it's okay that there's more people in the park. This is okay, measures are lifting because things are getting better, you're safe. I think that level of reassurance embedded into that timeline activity that I talked about and embedded in talking to your children is really important when we're trying to manage kids' anxiety after lockdown. Okay, my next key point is to plan a positive activity each day. Now, as things change, kids are maybe going to be doing more stuff, maybe they are starting to go to school, but I think planning something at the beginning of the day, maybe for the end of the day, just brings a bit of excitement to each day. It brings a bit of focus, it brings some structure as well. So maybe your child is starting to go back to nursery or school or something like that. You could plan an activity for later on that night. Talk to them about, you know, going to the play park or doing something in the house, doing something creative or fun in the house, or cooking their favourite meal tonight. Something like that brings a level of positivity and excitement is really going to be very effective for a child when they're trying to manage anxiety as lockdown eases or as we come towards the end of lockdown due to coronavirus. Bringing a little bit of enjoyment to that day, I think, is vital. My second to last point is to continuously, steadily implement a level of exposure. Now, I always use that word tentatively, particularly when thinking about working with children or anything to do with children, that level of exposure, because I think sometimes that can be quite scary. We all know what kind of exposure therapy is, and we're showing the thing that we're most scared of, and we've got to just get used to it, and it's terrifying in the moment, and then we can accept it. That's not exactly what I mean here. Of course, we have to think of this on an ethical level, and I think a steady implementation of exposure to these scary situations is healthy and appropriate for a child. You know, one of the worst things we could do is, if our child is so scared to go out, is to just lock the doors and not let them out. That wouldn't be effective for anybody. But steadily implementing a little bit of exposure is really important. Again, I go back to that child in the park, the example for this video. You know, maybe instead of going to the park and that child being super scared, they could have gone and walk up the street and back. Maybe they could have gone to a grandparent's garden first and then steadily implementing going to the park. So I think what that does is it kind of desensitizes us to the fear of a new situation. So as lockdown measures start to lift and as coronavirus situation starts to ease, implementing small levels of exposure therapy could be really, really good when we're trying to manage child's anxiety. Okay, my final point is to keep a regular routine as much as possible. We're creatures of routine primarily. You know, we enjoy routine and we're part of a structure throughout our day. We expect routine as we wake up. During coronavirus, we've had our routine pretty much thrown out the window and we've had to create a new routine. Managing a new routine as lockdown measures end and keeping to that structure is going to be really beneficial for children in easing their anxiety. Again, I go back to that intolerance of uncertainty. We have to create certainty where we can, you know, as best we can. Days that they're not in school, let's have a set routine. Days they are maybe going back to school, let's have a set routine. Let's have a set routine for our weekends to some degree, our evenings. Creating some kind of structure, some kind of familiarity will bring comfort and will ease anxiety. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. Today we've been taking a look at managing children's anxiety as lockdown eases, or managing your kids' anxiety after coronavirus. Really hope you've enjoyed today's video and found use in it. If you have, make sure to share it. You can like it, comment on it as well. And if you've been enjoying GetPsyched as a whole, make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get weekly reminders every time we upload. Thanks again so much for watching guys, and hopefully catch you next week.